Next Sunday, actually, we will celebrate the 500th edition of this iteration of the Mother of All Talk Shows. This show has been going almost 20 years, and it is now in the most splendid form it has ever been in. Our numbers are exponential, which is why they are trying so hard to shut us down. But they will not succeed, at least not if you continue to support us. Our numbers have risen exponentially since that first edition almost 500 times ago. But to more important matters. The Chief Executive Officer of BBC News and the Director General of the BBC himself have resigned this evening, having been caught red-handed, presiding over a tower of lies. In this case, the proximate reason is the deliberate falsification, not for the first time, by the BBC flagship show Panorama, of the words spoken by President Donald Trump on the issue of January 6th and the so-called insurrection, about which more later. But I want to start with the masters of war, who were gathered, their faces waxen with fake grief in Whitehall this morning, their poppies ever larger and worn ever earlier. Some of the people responsible for the worst bloodshed of the 21st century and amongst the worst bloodshed in the whole history of the United Kingdom were gathered there with their poppies and with their wreaths, dressed in their mourning suits. These hypocrites, Robert Burns, the great bard of my own country of Scotland, put it best on the Ode to a Thanksgiving. Ye hypocrites, are these your pranks, to murder men and gie God thanks? Halt, desist, go nae further. God'll no accept your thanks for murder. But they were at it again today. The words of Robert Burns are unknown to them. They are ready to fake the sincerity, and after that, the rest is easy. There was John Major, the architect of the first Iraq War, which paved the way to the second Iraq War, and in between, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children died of sanctions, murdered by sanctions, by men in suits in New York and in Whitehall. The cast was not complete until Tony Blair walked onto the stage. Tony Blair, the man responsible for the greatest loss of life unleashed by the United Kingdom in the entire history of the country, was there, looking as if he never wanted to see another war again, when all the while he and his co-conspirators were no doubt planning the ultimate war, no doubt planning the war to end all wars, no doubt planning World War III itself. David Cameron was there, the man who destroyed Libya, killed thousands, broke Libya into sundry pieces, each ruled by a gang, a warlord, all in the name, as he said at the time, with Nicolas Sarkozy, currently resident of a penitentiary in Paris. David Cameron, though, is still at large and still faking the grief. The war criminal Keir Starmer was there. He's the man who presided over the collaboration of British armed forces and the British civil service with the murderous genocidal regime of Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the man who said Israel had every right to starve the captive population of the Gaza Strip of food, of water, of medicine, of electricity. Yes, they have the right to do that, said the human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, who's done everything he could to wreck the possibility of a peaceful, negotiated settlement to the war in Ukraine, and who will be, I promise you, the last man standing when Donald Trump himself is in Moscow, when every sanction has been removed by Washington, D.C., when Germany is back negotiating new energy contracts to stop the destruction of their own manufacturing industry, Keir Starmer will still be the last man calling for war. These masters of war who are on a revolving door, when they leave political office, they go into business, often directly military business, and when it is not directly, it is indirectly. These masters of war who build the big guns, who build the big planes, who build the big bombs, who live in their mansions and send young men to die in the mud, these masters of war imagine that all the money that they have made can buy back their soul, but it cannot. Let me turn to the events of January 6th. I said all along to you, and many of you laughed, I began to get shadow banned and strangulated because I said so, that the 2020 presidential election in the United States was rigged. I said all along that January 6th, which was in any case no more than a particularly rumbustious night on Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow, far from being an insurrection, it was an after closing time brawl in Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow. I told you it was a state provocation. I told you it was a continuation of the Russiagate hoax, which destroyed Trump's first presidency and was the proximate reason for the rigging of the presidential election that put him out. I said all along to you that Joe Biden could not possibly have polled 82 million votes. Simply impossible. He campaigned from a basement. He was already semi-senile and perfectly visible for anyone who was paying attention. I told you that when I went to bed, Trump was winning. And when I woke up, Joe Biden had beaten him like a drum, had beaten him by a landslide. We all covered relentlessly. We covered the hanging chads and the broken counting machines and the skullduggery, the Tammany Hall theatrics of which the Democratic Party in the United States was long famous. I told you that Joe Biden was an illegitimate president. And when I saw the events on January 6th, I could virtually see the FBI badges amongst the most extreme agitators on the square around the Capitol building. I knew that it was something rotten was being done to criminalize Trump, to make sure that he never came back, to put a spike in his heart, and they very nearly did so. I told you over and over again that these provocations were carried out by, were driven by, were conceptualized by the deep state and its Democratic Party overlords. And I'm saying to you now that I have been vindicated. I'm saying to you now that the breaking news that the pipe bomb planted by a terrorist in front of the Democratic Party headquarters, in which was sat Kamala Harris herself, it was falsely claimed that she was in the Capitol. She never left the Democratic Party headquarters where the pipe bomb was planted. But they counted on the deep state covering up the real identity of the pipe bomber. They counted on the willful obstruction of justice of the FBI, which has spent decades, 40, 50, 60 years covering up injustice, facilitating injustice. The FBI are now caught, and Kash Patel Donald Trump's own appointee, now has to explain how he knew for the last 10 months that that pipe bomber was a police officer in the Capitol Police, and now where? In the CIA. A Capitol policewoman with no weapons training was there with a weapon on the balustrade in the Capitol, but earlier she had been planting a pipe bomb which lay there for 7 hours and could have blown up innocent civilian passers-by. We now know, thanks to the internet, not thanks to the FBI, that with a 97% probability, that pipe bomber was a police woman, now a CIA operative. Once you know that, you know two things. You know, first of all, that this knocks Watergate into a cocked hat. Watergate, which brought down Richard Milhous Nixon, was a tea party, a children's play party, compared to the police planting a pipe bomb capable of creating death and destruction on a large scale in front of the Democratic Party headquarters so they could blame it on Trump. This news must cause heads to roll, right? Donald Trump was going to drain the swamp, wasn't he? Well, now we've seen the swamp. Now we can prove the swamp was so deeply involved in the fake January 6th insurrection. On the same day as the pipe bomb was planted, the fake invasion of the Capitol building, driven and provoked by FBI agents and other agents of the American state. It was done to destroy Trump. So what's Trump going to do about it? Well, first of all, he'll have to require the resignation of his own director, who has known the identity of the pipe bomber for 10 whole months and either didn't tell Donald Trump, in which case he needs to be arrested, never mind sacked, or he did tell him. And that would point to an even more awkward conclusion. That conclusion would be that Donald Trump is so compromised by the swamp he promised to drain that even when presented with irrefutable, unanswerable proof that his entire presidency was sabotaged and even the inauguration was sabotaged, now that we know that the deep state has been caught red-handed, there's only two conclusions possible. Either Donald Trump has joined the deep state and is the swamp, or is too powerless to drain that swamp. And my money's on the latter, because that would explain many other things. It would explain Trump's acquiescence to Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza. It would explain Trump's total failure to end the Ukraine war in 24 hours, as he promised that he would do. It would explain, above all, why the Epstein files cannot possibly be released, even though Donald Trump campaigned on the promise that he was going to release them. And as if by magic, just before Moats comes on the air, two of the most important figures in British television are forced to hand in their resignations. Panorama is a standing disgrace to journalism and to the British people. It has been used as the sewer over and over again to feed the bilge required to build the narrative that the British state wanted to build. It destroyed Jeremy Corbyn's chances of becoming the Prime Minister of Britain. That very show, the Panorama, which accused Corbyn and Labour under Corbyn as a cesspit of anti-Semitism when nothing could have been further from the truth. But that was Corbyn. The British state was very keen to see the end of Corbyn, see the end of any possibility of a real Labour government. This time, it's much more serious. This time, Panorama has been caught splicing Donald Trump's speech on January 6th to falsely accuse him of directing the events of January 6th when the truth was the complete opposite. When the truth was that Trump told everyone to go home peacefully, they twisted, as they had twisted so many things, from the miners' strike through Corbyn and now Trump. They twisted and spliced and edited and re-edited a speech that had Trump saying the precise opposite. That's much more serious because, well, Trump rules Britain. Trump is the president of NATO, the president of Western Europe, the president of the United Kingdom. And when the BBC was caught out falsifying the words of their own president for their own twisted, centrist narrative, they had to go. The Director General, the number one man in the British state media outfit, the BBC, and the head of news of the BBC have both resigned this evening, just in time for my monologue on the mother of all talk shows. Don't go away. Right after this is Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, who knows a thing or two about war and has had to learn a thing or two about politics. Stay tuned.